solar lunchbox light. Step 1, take apart the 12-volt cigarette lighter plug. Keep all the small parts in a plastic bag so you don't lose them. And then step 1A, color the positive and terminal red, the negative black. Step 1B, carefully remove the terminals. Step 1C, cut off the wires, resistor, and LED that are already in there. You can see the wires are already in there. Red and black in this case, but usually red. So to take it apart, we've got the positive tip, the tip holder with little lines to make it easier to hold onto the silver ring. And you just unscrew the tip holder. If it's hard to do, you can use our tool. The end of our tool is a pliers to help you. And be careful when you unscrew it, all these little parts are going to come out. There's the positive tip, tip holder, the fuse, the spring, and the silver ring. The silver ring you take apart by just using a strong fingernail underneath it, and it pops off. So that's the top half. To take apart the bottom half, use a precision screwdriver, small Phillips screwdriver, push down hard. And there's a screw, and there's also on the backside a nut. The nut may come out. There it is, it fell out. The screw will come out when you hold it upside down. Nut and screw. And now very carefully, just using your fingers, pull apart the two halves. Try not to let anything fall out. There, it didn't fall out too much. This part, of course, is the strain relief. And before the parts come out, we want to color the positive and the negative terminals red and black. Without twisting, this little L-shaped one is the positive terminal, without bending it any, because if you bend it, like I may have already bent it a little bit, it's not going to fit back in easily. There we go, I got it to pop in. So the positive terminal, in this case it's pretty easy to see because the red wires are connected to the positive terminal. I'll just color the side of it red, this edge, because if I color on top, the ink will block the electricity from going through this positive terminal. Terminal, of course, means the end of something. This is the end of the red wires, the positive wires. There'll just be one positive wire once we're done. So I'm going to color this red, nice and dark, because the ink may come off a little bit. This shows us that this edge that I've colored red is going to be the side that goes up. And the other thing to notice is the red wire is connected on the lower left side of the positive terminal. I think I'm just going to draw that here on my paper to remind me. Here's the positive terminal, it's colored red. And the solder, which I'll draw in black. The soldered red wire is soldered on at the lower left corner. Okay, same thing now for the black negative terminal. Whoops. Notice that there are two negative terminals shaped like ears or horns on an animal. This one on the left is not connected to any wire. It's just there to help the plug stay in place when you plug it in, because these negative terminals spring back. So when you plug the plug in, they'll get squished a little bit, then they'll spring back and hold the plug in. So don't take out the one on the left or the one that whichever doesn't have a wire connected to it, because it's just hard to put it back in again. So the one on the right, which we are going to work with, I'm going to color black. Along the side here to remind me which side is up. And then I'll draw myself a little picture here to remind me that for the negative terminal, which is shaped like an ear or a horn, the solder is going to be, here's the shape of the negative terminal. The soldering wire is going to be on the bottom here. A little bit of solder, which we can reuse, and then the wire. Now, step 1B, carefully remove the terminals. Whoops, another earthquake. So I want to remove them, so especially the red positive terminal, so I don't bend it. If I bend it, it'll be hard to put back in. So very carefully, I'm just going to pull on the wires here. I'll pull on the black negative terminal. It's the red terminal, the positive terminal. I want to try and not even touch it, because if I touch it, I'm likely to bend it. It all comes out. And now step 1C, cut off the wires and the little LED and resistor, all the things that are here. Most of the time your wires will be only red, but it doesn't matter. We're going to replace them with our own red and black wires. Notice where the solder is already on this negative terminal. We can just use that solder, a little bit of solder again, add our own. So I'm going to cut off the negative terminal, going to cut off the wires from the positive red terminal. Get it all off there without messing up the terminal itself. There we go. And then that little bit that's left on there, I can just kind of pry that off with my fingernails. So positive, boy, I haven't bent that too out of shape, negative terminal. So that's the end of step 1. Step 2, soldering the wires onto the terminals. Step 2A, going to cut about 3 feet of red and black wire. And 3 feet is about the length of, say, from your left shoulder to the end of your right arm, or if you're 6 feet tall, from the center of your chest to the end of your right arm when you hold your arm out. Because when you hold your 2 arms out, straight out, that's the same as your height. Here's our red positive terminal, maybe bent a tiny bit, black negative terminal. Here's the wire. Step 2B, pull apart about 1 inch of wire at each end. You can always pull apart more later if you need to, but let's start with about 1 inch at this end. And you may need someone with good fingernails to help you out with this. Fingernails, I think, really are the best way. If you use a knife or something sharp, you're going to probably cut the wire. Then step 2C, strip about 1/4 of an inch off each end of the wire. Of course, this is 18 stranded, so I'm using on the right-hand side where it says stranded and then the number 18. If you've got the right in the right hole, it should be very easy to do. It should come right off. And then at the other end, same thing. Maybe later on we'll end up stripping a little bit more, but we can start with that. Now soldering the parts on. Remember, here's the positive terminal. Let's start with that. It's a little easier. Remember, there's already a little bit of solder on there that you could just melt and use again, but I read once that it's sort of poor practice to reuse solder, so we'll also add a little bit of our own solder. So I'm going to put this so it's pretty flat, level, so the solder won't roll off. What's the most important thing? I'm going to ask you guys in the class now, before I start soldering, what's the most important thing for me to do here? What do you think? Hopefully someone got it. Safety glasses. Because this solder can fly. It doesn't happen very often, but it has, little drops of it have flown up and hit me in the arm before. Fortunately, nothing's ever hit me in the eye because I'm always wearing the safety glasses. So just please take this very seriously and always wear the safety glasses because you don't want to risk losing your eyesight. That would be, you know, just tragic. So the wires are going to come straight down. This is an important point. I'll put this in the notes. Straight down in line with the part, not off to the side. And of course, our helping hands is a little tired here. I'll put the red wire inside the helping hands and the other part, the terminal inside the other helping hand. And then of course, got my safety glasses on. I'm going to tin the wire, which means putting a little bit of solder on the wire itself, top and bottom. Not much. I'm going to add a little bit of solder where there's already solder on the part. And then this, of course, is the tricky part. Just melting, hopefully both parts of solder on the wire and on the part together by putting the soldering iron between them. And then when they're both hot and liquidy, just pushing down on the wire. I'm pushing down on the helping hand instead. And you wait about 20 seconds until the bright, shiny solder turns a duller color, and then we test it, and it should be very strong. The only problem is that wasn't a smart way to test it, because I just pulled this part out of shape a little bit, which we don't want. Okay, so that's step 2D, soldering the red wire onto the red terminal. Now it's going to be exactly the same with the black wire onto the negative terminal. There's already a little bit of solder there, so we'll just try and reuse that. Let's see if I can get it to just stay. Whoa, that's not going to work. And that was definitely not going to work. So let's just try clipping on to one part of the part. Try and keep it kind of level so that the solder doesn't drip off, roll off. And it's going to be the exact same thing. I've got my safety glasses on. I'm going to tin the wire, which means putting a little bit of solder on the wire, top and bottom. I'm going to add a little bit of extra solder, fresh solder where there's already some on the part, just because that's good practice. And then hold the parts very close together. Put the solder down, the roll of solder down, because you can't, don't hold on to that one. You need two hands for this. One hand's going to melt the solder on the part and on the wire. The other hand's going to push them down together without getting your hand and fingers too close to that hot soldering iron tip. And let's see, seems like it's pretty strong. You let it dry a full 20 seconds until the bright, shiny white solder turns a sort of dull, not shiny. You can test it a little bit more. So this is good. All right, step 3 now, reassembling the plug. I've already soldered my wires, that was step 2. And if you remember, I have the little drawings there, they're upside down, that shows which way the parts went. That's helpful. The red positive terminal went this way with the wire coming down on the left. Hopefully I haven't bent it up too much and it will still fit. And if it doesn't fit, might need to just bend it back into shape a little bit. It fit tightly, that's really good. Bend in the end so it fits, the solder fits in. The black negative terminal is going to go, and this is the hardest part of the whole thing, so let me hold it up closer. Into the slot. The soldered wire part goes at the bottom, out of the way. Into the slot, And then at the top half, the little curved end fits right up against the curved space in the plastic plug. And we bend this in and stick it so it's in between, I don't know, hopefully you can see that, the two little dots there. That's holding in place so it will spring back. And look how close the positive terminal is to the negative wire. If they get too close, you'll have a short circuit. So you might even, if you had a situation like this, want to put a little drop of hot glue in between them. I'm not going to do that now because I think they're fine. The wires come out the bottom. And now we'll take the strain relief and slide it from the other end of the wire because it was easier not to have it on at the beginning here. Slide it so the wide end goes in towards the part, plug. Like this. We'll just twist these together temporarily to hold them. Wide end goes in towards the plug. I'll slide it all the way down. Little knot there. Another little knot. And it's going to tuck right in to its little slot here, a little sideways, the flat end facing up and down. Okay, so that was step 3A. I'll put the spring right down in the center channel here first before I reassemble the part. And now I'm going to take the other half of the plug, and the round end that has the threading on it matches up to the other round end, that's the top. And take one more little check that these wires, are the terminal and wire, aren't touching in there. I think those are actually far enough apart that they're not going to touch. And not touching here. We'll test it when we're all done for that. We'll test for what's called continuity. So it should be pretty easy to just snap the part back together. We have to push a little bit, but if you've got everything in there securely, the part should just go back together. And now step 3C, we're going to put the silver ring on top where the hole is to hold the top half together. Step 3D, we're going to use the nut and the screw to hold the bottom half of the plug together. And see, if you take a look at this real carefully, it doesn't matter which side you put the nut and which side you put the screw, because both sides have this hexagonal, this six-sided shape like a stop sign, which is for holding the nut. So I'll put the nut in on this side. It should fit securely right in that hole. If it doesn't, you have to turn it a little bit, maybe. And hold it with my fingers so it doesn't fall out. Turn it upside down here, put the screw in the other half. The most important thing about these precision screwdrivers is don't lose them. Precision screwdriver, as far as I know, means a small screwdriver, small Phillips screwdriver. Don't lose them, because if we lose them, or heaven forbid someone takes one, no, you guys would never do that, right? We're not going to be able to do this project. You're only screwing yourself, so to speak. Ha ha ha, little pun there. So pushing down hard, I'm turning the screw just until it stops turning. I don't need to crank on this too strong, forcefully. Just gentle pressure until it stops turning. Now, the last step is to put the other parts back in order. Already done the silver ring through the top here. What's the order? The spring's already in there. The spring makes the fuse bounce up and down. So next I'll put the fuse in and we can check that it bounces up and down because of the spring. Then here's the tip holder, and the tip goes in the tip holder this way, so the little edge on it, little lip on it will hold it so it doesn't fall out. And then I'll turn that upside down and put it all together, screw the tip holder into the plug, pushing down to compress the spring. And now the positive tip should be able to spring up and down. The negative terminal should spring in and out. Step 3G, testing for continuity. In other words, making sure that the red and black wires, which are attached to the negative and positive terminals and the positive tip here, are not touching each other inside the plug. That would cause a short circuit, blow the fuse in the plug, and maybe the fuse attached to your battery on your solar lunchbox, and maybe do other bad things like smoke or sparks or start a fire. So they're very close together inside the red and black wire in these parts. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take our multimeter and I'm gonna put it on a setting we haven't used before. It's called continuity, and it shows the little parachute or Wi-Fi symbol here. 3 little parachute lines. I'll draw that here. It looks like this. And it's called continuity. And what continuity means is, can the electricity get through from one place to another, from the red test probe to the black? If it can get through the circuit, then the meter makes a beeping sound. So you can hear that. So if I touch, let's hope, the red terminal onto the positive tip and the black terminal onto one of the negative tips and then the other, there's no beeping sound. That's good. That means I did it right. Now let's try something else. I'll connect the red terminal to the red wire at the end here, the bare wire, and connect the other end to the positive tip. That does have continuity. The meter is beeping. That's the way it should be. The red wire should connect to the positive tip and not to either the black tips. Now we'll try the opposite. And this is the test you're going to do, step 3G. Connect the black wire. It doesn't matter in this case whether you connect black to red or red to black, just one end to one end of the wire. And it is beeping. It's a little weak. Maybe I need to hold it there. There we go. It does have continuity. The black electricity goes from the end of the black wire through to this side of the negative terminal. Step 4, assemble the 3 LEDs and the resistor and cover with heat shrink tubing. So the first step is to get your 3 LEDs, and we know that the longer leg, the longer wire is the positive wire. I'll pull them apart a little bit. So just at the top, not covering the whole thing, but just at the top, I'm going to put a little red on the longer leg so I can easily identify it, and a little bit of black on the shorter leg so I can easily identify it. Don't want to cover the whole thing again with ink because the ink will block the electricity from going through, so I'm just coloring them at the top. And here we are again, longer, shorter. This is going to make it really easy to twist them together without making any mistakes. And they're going to twist together in series. Let me ask the class now, who remembers what does series mean when we're attaching these 3 LEDs together? What does series mean? Anybody remember? I think someone must have got it by now. So that's right, connecting red to black, positive to negative. And the best way to do it, I'm going to try it. So that's step 4A. Color the top bit of each wire, each LED. We're going to twist them together in series. So I'll start with one here. And actually I'm going to start with the resistor. The resistor, take the little pieces of paper off if they're still there. And the resistor is going to go on the positive leg of the first LED. I'll wrap it around many times so it stays on there. It's all going to be covered up with heat shrink tubing. Now here's our black wire. This is step 4B, twisting together the wires, the LEDs in series with resistor attached to the first one on the positive end. So here's our black wire. We'll twist it together with the red from the other LED. Let's try it a couple different ways here. I'll try just crossing them and then twisting them one on top of the other. That works pretty well. That's probably going to do it. Another idea would be to use our tool, our wire tool here, which has a little pliers on the end, and twist with the very end of the wire tool. And the tool would be good for squeezing together these two little ends that are sticking apart. So now the last one, that worked nicely with the tool. Let's do that again. Black's coming out, so we connect it to the red from the other one, positive to negative. Cross them, put them in a cross, X shape. It's hard to do because they're so small here. We'll twist them. Doesn't really matter which way you twist them. I've taught you to do everything clockwise, but this is one thing that really doesn't matter. I'll twist them using the tool. We're going to also solder them together so they really will stay together. So there. Red to black, resistors here on the end. Okay, trying this again. This time when I solder here, the LEDs together and the LED to the resistor, I'm just going to use the tiniest little bit of solder that I can possibly put on here. Basically just tinning the wire like we've been talking about. That way the solder joint will fit inside, and there's a little bit sticking out. I'm going to sort of comb it and smooth it out. It will fit inside the heat shrink tubing. Okay, so that's the first step. Then of course I'm going to take my little small size heat shrink tubing, and since I've made a really nice, clean, thin, small solder joint, this will fit on really easily. And the other half of it, if you only have one piece, can go on the other one. And then very gently, again, using the soldering iron, make sure that stays on, melting it on both sides, on the top and bottom, to insulate and hold together the solder joints so you won't get a shock if you touch this. Top, bottom, very delicately. Brain surgery here. So back to this soldering. the wires onto the LEDs and resistors. So as I learned before, the secret is a really small, slim, minimalistic soldering. So I'm going to try and twist these together very tightly. I don't want anything to stick out too far because then the heat shrink tubing doesn't fit on. Twist these together as tightly as I can. And then, got my glasses on, just solder a very thin layer of solder on top, not too much. Don't want anything to get too thick and bulky here. Just like that, it's just tinning the wire. The same thing on the other side. Meanwhile, these heat shrink tubes are way far up, far away from where you're soldering, to make sure that they don't accidentally melt too soon. So same thing here. I'm just going to twist these together as tightly as I can. Real slim, trim, thin. Okay, like that. Then very minimalistic soldering there. Just enough to sort of tin the wire, cover up all the copper, tuck in all the little pieces here, or solder them off. That's probably fine. Less is more with solder sometimes. Now, let's see how well I did. If I did real well, the heat shrink tubing should easily slide up and over the LED and the resistor wires. So this is going pretty well this time, as you can see. The way it should go. Try and keep everything really straight so that this slides up easily. So my resistor's getting a little crooked there. I'll straighten it out without breaking it. There, all the way up to the top. And the same thing here for the black one. Black wire, negative wire. Hopefully my solder isn't too thick there. No, it's good. It's all the way up to the top. So I'll heat shrink those. And then we'll see if the big one fits on top. These are fitting so far, so that's promising. Just very gently running the soldering iron over the sides and the top and the bottom to heat shrink this. Helps hold the wire and the LEDs together, plus protect from a short circuit. Don't overdo it. You don't want to burn through and burn the wire, cut the wire. Less is more again with this. And it came off. So, good. Now, if you remember, the last step is the big piece of heat shrink. And you know, one thing to do here, I keep forgetting, take off the goggles, because the goggles interfere with your vision. Only use the goggles when you're soldering. So there, it wasn't easy, but finally got this large size piece of heat shrink tubing to slip over all of the other smaller ones and the LED, the resistor and the red and black wires. And now I just take very gently the soldering iron and go over the four sides of the big piece of heat shrink. This will be like the case for your flashlight, the housing that holds it all together. And that's good, so it's done. Congratulations, you've finished the Solar Lunchbox Lite.